I kept my past as a Marine officer secret from my wife for 12 years. Then I heard her on the phone with her father. He's a weakling. Send your men to the warehouse tomorrow. Make it look like an accident. Little did she know, I built that warehouse specifically for such an occasion. The calls I made ensured her father's entire clan was walking into a slaughterhouse. Look, I get it. When you see me at the hardware store debating between eggshell and off-white paint samples, you're not exactly thinking, wow, that guy probably knows 17 different ways to kill someone with a Phillips head screwdriver. And that's exactly the point. I'm Marcus Hale, owner of Hale Construction LLC, a company that specializes in commercial buildings, residential renovations, and apparently, boring the absolute hell out of anyone who asks me about load-bearing walls at cocktail parties. I wear khakis. Khakis, the official uniform of men who've given up on life and started caring about their 401k. I drive a sensible Ford F-150, not because I'm hauling materials, but because it makes sense and holds its value. I attend parent-teacher conferences for kids I don't even have yet, just to scout the neighborhood. My wife Clara thinks the most dangerous thing I've ever done was eat gas station sushi on a road trip to Vermont. She has no idea that the sushi was probably safer than half the missions I ran in Kandahar. For 12 years, Clara has looked at me like I'm a golden retriever in human form, loyal, harmless, and slightly confused by technology. She genuinely believes that the highlight of my week is watching me reorganize the garage or finally fixing that squeaky door hinge I've been meaning to get to. Last Tuesday, she watched me spend 45 minutes researching lawn fertilizers and actually said, "You're so cute when you're being responsible." Cute. Lady, I once infiltrated a terrorist compound with nothing but a pocket knife and a really bad attitude. But sure, let's go with cute because I remembered to buy the organic fertilizer instead of the chemical stuff that would probably work better but might upset the neighborhood HOA. The truth, though? The truth is something that would make Clara spill her overpriced oat milk latte all over her Lululemon yoga pants. I wasn't always Marcus Hale, king of contractor quotes and weekend barbecues. Before I became this beige, khaki-wearing, spreadsheet-loving version of masculinity, I was Captain Marcus J. Hale, United States Marine Corps, Force Reconnaissance. Not the Marines who stand around looking pretty at embassies, though those guys are cool too. I'm talking about the Marines who get dropped into places that don't exist on maps, with missions that never happened, to eliminate problems that were never there in the first place. The kind of Marine who knows that a shoelace isn't just for shoes. It's a perfectly viable weapon if you know the right pressure points and have about 45 seconds of privacy. The kind of Marine who can tell you exactly how long someone can survive with a punctured lung versus a severed artery, not because I'm a doctor, but because field experience is one hell of a teacher. I've got scars that Clara has never seen because I'm weirdly modest about changing shirts, or at least that's what I've told her. Really, I'm just avoiding the conversation about why I have a 6-inch knife wound on my left ribcage and what looks like a bullet graze on my shoulder that I swore was from a really bad mountain biking accident in college. Clara bought it because Clara wants to buy it. She wants to believe that the most traumatic thing in my past is probably a bad breakup or maybe some student loan debt. She has no idea that I've held dying men in my arms, that I've made calls that saved hundreds of lives and ended dozens more, that there's a box of commendations in my safety deposit box that I'll never show anyone because they're all classified 6 ways to Sunday. But here's where it gets really fun. Clara's dad, Victor Rowe. Oh, Victor. Victor with his perfectly tailored suits and his import-export business that somehow requires meeting with Eastern European guys named Dimitri at 3 in the morning. Victor, who always has that weird bulge under his left armpit that's definitely not a colostomy bag. Victor, who has the kind of handshake that feels like he's cataloging your bone density for future reference. This man shows up to family dinners with stories about shipping delays and customs issues that sound like they were lifted directly from a bad mob movie. His hands have scars that don't come from paper cuts or kitchen accidents. Those are knife-fighting scars, the kind you get from actual combat, not from accidentally grabbing the wrong end of a steak knife at Outback Steakhouse. I noticed it all on day one. The way he sizes people up when he walks into a room, always positioning himself with his back to the wall and a clear view of all exits. The way his business associates, all have that same dead-eyed look of men who've done things they can't talk about in therapy. The way his import-export company somehow ships luxury goods, but his warehouses are in the absolute worst parts of town, the kind of neighborhoods where even the cops patrol in pairs. And don't even get me started on his holiday parties, where half the guests look like they're one bad day away from a RICO indictment and the other half look like they're actively wearing wires. But do I say anything? Hell no. I smile. I shake hands. I accept his ridiculously expensive whiskey that probably costs more than my first car and tastes like regret and oak barrels. I laugh at his terrible jokes about millennials and participation trophies. I nod enthusiastically when he talks about business opportunities that I should really consider because a smart guy like you could go far in this industry. Translation: Hey son-in-law, want to help me smuggle some questionable cargo and maybe launder some money through your construction company? It'll be fun. We can do father-son bonding while committing federal crimes. I play the part perfectly. I'm the harmless son-in-law who married his daughter because I was swept off my feet by her artistic soul and her passion for overpriced brunch spots. I'm the guy who asks boring questions about his golf game and pretends to be impressed when he talks about his yacht like it's a personality trait. I'm the devoted husband who's just so grateful that Victor gave me a chance with his precious daughter, like I should be grateful that I get to spend holidays with a man who probably has more bodies buried than a Victorian cemetery. The whole family thinks I'm this adorable, slightly hapless guy who lucked into marrying up. Clara's mother, God rest her soul, used to pat my cheek and say things like, "You're such a sweet boy, Marcus." So different from the men Clara usually dated. Yeah, because the guys Clara usually dated were probably just as dirty as her father, and she needed someone who looked clean enough to pass inspection. I was the perfect cover. Boring, reliable, uncomplicated Marcus who owns a construction company and whose idea of a wild Friday night is watching HGTV and eating takeout Thai food. If only they knew. If only they had even the slightest clue that every smile I give them is calculated. Every handshake is an assessment. Every family dinner is me gathering intelligence like I'm back in the field. If they knew that when Victor talks about his business, I'm mentally mapping his entire operation, identifying weak points, cataloging associates, running background checks in my head based on nothing but surnames and the way they drink their coffee. If they knew that their harmless Marcus could disassemble and reassemble a rifle in under 2 minutes, could clear a room faster than most people can clear their browser history, could disappear so completely that even the government that trained me would have trouble tracking me down. But they don't know. They don't suspect. And that's exactly how I like it. Because the best weapon in any arsenal isn't a gun or a knife or even a perfectly executed plan. The best weapon is being consistently underestimated by everyone around you. It's being the guy that nobody sees coming because nobody's even looking at you in the first place. It's being so deeply, profoundly boring that you become invisible, a background character in your own life, someone who couldn't possibly be anything other than exactly what they appear to be. So I keep playing the part. I keep wearing the khakis and debating paint colors and pretending that the most stressful part of my day is dealing with difficult clients or managing subcontractors. I keep being Marcus Hale, the ordinary husband, the boring son-in-law, the guy who's just happy to be here and grateful for the opportunity to be part of this family. And while they're all busy underestimating me, I'm busy watching, waiting, and preparing for the inevitable moment when this whole carefully constructed house of cards comes tumbling down. Because it will. They always do. And when it does, they're going to realize way too late that they should have paid more attention to the quiet guy in the corner who never seemed interesting enough to worry about. By then, of course, it'll be far too late. But hey, that's what they get for thinking boring equals harmless. In my experience, the most dangerous people are always the ones nobody sees coming. Let me tell you about the day I met Clara, because it's the kind of story that makes me want to travel back in time and slap myself across the face. Hard. Maybe twice. It was one of those perfect autumn mornings in Seattle, the kind where the air smells like coffee and rain and poor life decisions. I was sitting in this bougie coffee shop called the Grounded Bean, or the Bean Ground, or whatever pretentious name they'd slapped on it to justify charging $8 for a cup of coffee that tastes exactly like the $3 version from 7-Eleven. I was reading the newspaper like some kind of old man because I hadn't fully adapted to civilian life yet, and still didn't trust getting my news from the internet, when suddenly, splash. Hot liquid everywhere. All over my shirt, my lap, my newspaper, probably my dignity. And there she was, Clara Rowe, looking absolutely horrified, holding an empty coffee cup like it was a murder weapon and she'd just been caught red-handed. Her eyes were wide, her mouth making this perfect little "oh" of shock, and she immediately started apologizing in that breathy, panicked way that people do when they think they've just ruined someone's entire existence. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm such a klutz. Oh God, this is your shirt, it's ruined. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for dry cleaning. I'll buy you a new shirt. I'll buy you 10 new shirts. Oh my God. She kept saying, oh my God, like she was praying to a deity who specialized in coffee-related disasters. And honestly, the whole thing was kind of adorable. The Marine in me, the part that had been trained to assess threats in milliseconds, immediately clocked her as harmless. Pretty, flustered, definitely not a threat. The regular human part of me, the part that apparently doesn't have any survival instincts when confronted with the attractive woman in distress, thought, well, this is cute. Spoiler alert, it was not cute. It was a setup, but we'll get to that. At the time, though, I was completely buying what she was selling. I stood up, coffee dripping off me like I'd just participated in some kind of terrible wet t-shirt contest that nobody asked for, and I did what any idiot would do. I smiled. I actually smiled and said something monumentally stupid like, it's totally fine. Don't worry about it. It's just coffee. Just coffee. Like it wasn't scalding hot and all over my favorite shirt, the one I'd actually ironed that morning because I had a meeting with a potential client who wanted to build a strip mall or something equally soul-crushing. But no, I was too busy being charmed by this woman who looked like she was about to cry into her empty coffee cup to care about my ruined shirt or my burned skin or the fact that I now smelled like a Starbucks bathroom. She insisted on buying me a new coffee, which turned into buying me breakfast, which turned into us sitting in that overpriced coffee shop for 2 hours talking about absolutely nothing and everything at the same time. She told me she was a struggling artist, which should have been my first red flag because literally everyone in Seattle is a struggling artist. It's like the city's official occupation. She painted, she said, abstract stuff, emotional pieces that explored the intersection of human vulnerability and urban isolation, or some other art school nonsense that sounded impressive but meant absolutely nothing. She showed me pictures on her phone of these paintings that honestly looked like a toddler had gotten into the paint supplies during a particularly chaotic tantrum, but I nodded and said things like, wow, that's really interesting, and I love the use of color, because apparently I was auditioning for the role of supportive boyfriend before I'd even gotten her last name. She talked about her dreams with this wistful quality that should have been another red flag. She wanted a simple life, she said. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated. Just a little studio apartment, time to paint, maybe a dog someday. Long walks through the city, farmers markets on Sunday mornings. That whole Pinterest fantasy life that nobody actually lives, but everyone pretends they want. She made it sound so genuine, so heartfelt, like she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to share these simple dreams with. And I, like an absolute moron, ate it up. I thought, this woman has been trapped in some complicated life and just wants something real. The Marine in me, the part that had been trained to protect and serve, immediately went into guardian mode. She needs protecting, I thought. She's vulnerable and genuine and needs someone stable in her life. The regular man part of me, the part that was apparently running the show that day, just thought, damn, she looks really good in that sundress. And she did. It was one of those flowy, floral things that women wear when they want to look casual, but have actually spent 45 minutes perfecting the I just threw this on look. Her hair was in this messy bun that had definitely taken precision engineering to achieve. Her makeup was the natural kind that requires 17 products and a YouTube tutorial. Everything about her screamed, I'm effortlessly beautiful and quirky, which should have told me that she was putting in way too much effort to look effortless. We exchanged numbers. We went on a date. Then another. Then another. Within 6 months, I was completely hooked. She played the part perfectly, I'll give her that. She was interested in my work, but not too interested, the perfect amount of supportive girlfriend without being clingy. She laughed at my jokes, even the terrible ones. She introduced me to her favorite spots around the city, Little hole-in-the-wall restaurants and obscure art galleries that made me feel like I was part of some exclusive club. She met my friends from the construction company and charmed them all. She even dealt with my weird habits, like the fact that I always sit facing the door in restaurants or that I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and do a perimeter check of the apartment because old habits die hard and paranoia dies harder. Looking back, I can see how calculated it all was. Every date was perfectly planned to make me feel like I was the one pursuing her, like I was lucky to have caught her attention. Every conversation was designed to make me reveal more about myself, while she revealed carefully curated details about her own life. She never talked about her family much, just vague mentions of a father in business and a mother who'd passed away. No siblings, no complicated family drama, nothing that would make me dig deeper. She was a blank slate, a perfectly constructed persona designed to be whatever I needed her to be. And what did I need? Apparently, I needed someone uncomplicated. Someone who wasn't part of the world I'd left behind. The world of classified missions and moral ambiguity and decisions that kept you up at night. I needed someone who represented normalcy, domesticity, a future that didn't involve wondering if today was the day someone from your past caught up with you. Clara offered all of that. She was my ticket to being a regular person, to having a regular life, to finally putting down roots and pretending that the first 30 years of my life had been some kind of weird dream. We got married at a small ceremony in her father's garden. Victor walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes that I now realize were probably tears of joy that his long-term operation was finally paying off. I wore a suit. She wore white. Everyone cried. It was beautiful and perfect and completely fake. But I didn't know that yet. I thought I'd found someone real, someone genuine, someone who loved me for who I was, not knowing that she loved me specifically because of who I wasn't, or who she thought I wasn't. 12 years. We were married for 12 years before everything fell apart. 12 years of playing house, of building a life together, of me thinking I'd successfully transitioned from Marine to civilian, from operator to ordinary. 12 years of Clara playing the role of devoted wife, while probably reporting back to Daddy Dearest about every detail of our life. 12 years of me being the world's most observant idiot, noticing everything except the obvious fact that my wife was running a long con on me. The thing is, I should have known better. I was trained to spot deception, to read people, to trust my instincts. But when it came to Clara, I ignored every red flag, every inconsistency, every moment when her mask slipped just slightly. Why? Because I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe that someone could love me without knowing the real me. I wanted to believe that I could have a normal life with a normal wife and normal problems like arguing about whose turn it is to take out the trash or what color to paint the dining room. But here's the thing about wanting to believe something. It makes you stupid. It makes you ignore the obvious. It makes you miss the signs that are right in front of your face. And Clara? Clara was counting on exactly that. She was counting on me being so desperate for normalcy that I'd overlook the fact that our entire relationship was built on a foundation of lies. Her lies, sure, but also my lies. Because I was lying too, pretending to be someone I wasn't, hiding my past, playing my own role in our little theatrical production of domestic bliss. Turns out, we were both actors. The difference is, I was method acting, really trying to become the character. Clara was just reading her lines, waiting for opening night, when the real show would finally begin. Victor Rowe's penthouse dinners were like attending a masterclass in organized crime cosplaying as family bonding. Every month, like clockwork, Clara and I would show up to his ridiculously overpriced downtown penthouse with a bottle of wine that cost more than my first car and my game face firmly attached. The place screamed, I have questionable income sources, from the Italian marble floors to the abstract art that was either worth millions or purchased. From a hotel liquidation sale, I honestly couldn't tell. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city like Victor was some kind of discount Batman villain. Except instead of wanting to destroy Gotham, he just wanted to smuggle weapons through it and maybe launder some money on the side. These dinners followed the same script every single time. Victor would answer the door in his $1,000 casual wear, because apparently even his lounging around the house clothes cost more than most people's wedding outfits. He'd give me that handshake, the one that lasted exactly 2 seconds too long and involved way too much eye contact. like he was trying to read my soul or figure out if I was wearing a wire. "Marcus, my boy," he'd boom, because apparently we were living in a 1950s mobster movie and nobody told me. Come in, come in. Clara, sweetheart, you look beautiful as always." Then he'd kiss her on both cheeks like we were in Europe and not in a Seattle penthouse that smelled like expensive cologne and criminal enterprise. Dinner was always catered by some chef whose name I couldn't pronounce, serving food I didn't recognize on plates that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Victor would hold court at the head of the table, which was long enough to land a small aircraft on, and launch into his stories about business. And oh, the stories. This man could make smuggling black market weapons sound like he was describing his fantasy football league. So I told Dimitri, "If you can't guarantee the shipment arrives on time, I'll find someone who can," he'd say, cutting into his Wagyu beef with the kind of knife that definitely wasn't just for steak. "You have to be firm with these Eastern European suppliers, Marcus. They respect strength, you know." "Yeah, Victor, I'm sure Dimitri was supplying you with artisanal cheese and not AK-47s. Totally legitimate business practices happening there." But I'd just nod and smile, playing the part of the interested son-in-law who was just grateful to be getting free business advice from a successful entrepreneur. "That's really smart, Victor," I'd say, like I didn't know exactly what kind of supplies he was talking about. "It's all about maintaining clear communication with your vendors." "Vendors? Sure. Let's call them vendors. Not arms dealers or drug traffickers, or whatever other delightful associates Victor had on his payroll." The best part, though, was when he'd pivot to his favorite topic, trying to recruit me into his criminal empire without actually saying he was trying to recruit me into his criminal empire. It was like watching someone try to sell you drugs while insisting they were just offering you alternative pharmaceutical solutions. Victor would lean back in his chair, swirling his whiskey that probably cost more than my truck, and say things like, "You know, Marcus, you're brilliant with logistics. Really brilliant. The way you manage your construction projects, coordinating all those moving parts, keeping everything on schedule, that's a rare talent." Here's where Clara would jump in, because apparently this was a tag team operation. She'd put her hand on my arm, doing that wife thing where she's simultaneously proud of me and volunteering me for something I don't want to do, and say, "Daddy thinks you could really help optimize his shipping operations, honey. You know, apply some of that construction project management expertise to his import-export business." She'd say this with a straight face, like she actually believed that moving steel beams and scheduling subcontractors was somehow equivalent to smuggling illegal weapons across international borders. "It's really not that different from what you already do," Victor would add, warming to his pitch. "You're moving materials from point A to point B, managing suppliers, dealing with customs and regulations. It's all logistics, my boy. And the pay." He'd trail off meaningfully, letting me imagine the kind of money he was offering. "Well, let's just say it would be significantly more lucrative than your current endeavors." Significantly more lucrative. Translation: "I will pay you obscene amounts of money to use your construction company as a front for my criminal operations, and if you get caught, you'll go to prison while I drink whiskey on my yacht." But I'd just smile and deflect, playing the humble businessman who was perfectly happy with his boring, legitimate construction company. "That's really generous of you, Victor, but I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing now. Besides, I don't know anything about the import-export business. I'd probably just slow you down." Self-deprecation, the perfect shield. Make them think you're too dumb or too cautious to be useful, and they'll eventually stop asking. Except Victor never stopped asking. Every month, same dinner, same pitch, slightly different angle. Sometimes he'd approach it from the family helping family direction. "We're family now, Marcus. Family takes care of each other. I'd love to bring you into the business, teach you everything I know." Other times he'd go with the "you're wasting your potential" route. "You're too smart to be building strip malls for suburban soccer moms, my boy. You could be doing something bigger, something more important." And my personal favorite, the barely veiled threat disguised as concern. "In this economy, Marcus, it pays to diversify. You never know when the construction business might hit a rough patch. It's always good to have multiple income streams." Clara would watch these exchanges with this weird mix of hope and calculation on her face, like she was mentally tallying up how close her father was getting to reeling me in. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between affection and assessment, like she was trying to figure out if I was actually as dumb as I seemed, or if I was just playing a really good game. The truth is, I was playing a game, just not the one they thought. While Victor was busy trying to recruit me into his criminal enterprise with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, I was busy cataloging everything. Every name he dropped, every business associate he mentioned, every shipping route he referenced in his stories, every complaint about customs delays or regulatory issues. I was building a map in my head, connecting dots, identifying patterns. When he'd complain about those idiots at the port who don't understand how business works, I'd make a mental note. Port operations, probably bribed officials. When he'd mention my guy in customs who knows how to expedite things, I'd file that away. Corrupted customs agents. When he'd casually reference that warehouse district near the airport that nobody pays attention to, I'd add it to my growing list of properties to investigate. Every dinner was an intelligence-gathering operation, and Victor had no idea he was briefing the enemy. But then came the dinner that changed everything. It was a Thursday. I remember because I'd had to reschedule a meeting with a client to make it, and Victor was in rare form. He'd just closed some big deal, probably sold enough illegal weapons to supply a small army, and he was celebrating with the expensive champagne and loose lips. He spent the whole dinner talking about his newest business opportunity, which involved some very specific logistics that made it clear he was smuggling something significantly more illegal than his usual fare. After dinner, Clara excused herself to the bathroom. Nothing unusual about that, except she took her phone with her, which she never did at her father's place. The bathroom was down a hallway past Victor's study, and the acoustics in that pretentious marble palace were better than Victor realized. I could hear her voice, muffled but clear enough, talking to someone on the phone. "He's a weakling," she said, and even through the wall, I could hear the contempt in her voice. "He won't be a problem. Send your men to the warehouse tomorrow night. Make it look like an accident." A weakling. She called me a weakling. Me. The guy who'd survived 2 tours in Afghanistan, who'd been decorated for valor, who'd killed more enemy combatants than she'd probably had hot yoga classes. The guy who'd been trained by the best military in the world to be a highly efficient killing machine. A weakling. I sat there at Victor's dinner table, smiling at whatever story he was telling about his golf game or his yacht or whatever rich person nonsense he was on about, and I felt something shift inside me. It was like a switch flipping, like the Marcus Hale persona I'd been wearing for 12 years suddenly became a costume I could take off. The Marine I'd been suppressing, the operator I'd been pretending wasn't there anymore, woke up. And he was pissed. Clara came back from the bathroom with this serene smile on her face, kissed me on the cheek, and asked if I wanted more wine. I smiled back and said yes, because that's what harmless, weakling Marcus would do. But inside, I was already planning, already strategizing, already preparing for war. Because here's the thing about being consistently underestimated. Eventually, someone underestimates you at exactly the wrong moment. And that's when you remind them why underestimation is a fatal mistake. Victor raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said. "To family," I echoed, clinking glasses with both of them. And I meant it. I was going to give them a family reunion they'd never forget. Let me tell you about my warehouse, because calling it a warehouse is like calling the Pentagon a filing cabinet. Sure, technically accurate, but missing about 90% of the story. When I bought that property 3 years ago in the industrial district, where even the rats carry switchblades, Clara thought I was having some kind of midlife crisis. "A warehouse, honey? Really? What are you going to do? Start collecting classic cars?" She'd laughed, that tinkling little laugh that I now realize was probably her thinking, "Perfect, another legitimate business front we can exploit." I just smiled and told her it was for equipment storage and maybe expanding the construction business. She bought it. Victor bought it. Hell, even my accountant bought it, though he did give me that look that said, "This is either brilliant or incredibly stupid," and I'm not sure which. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd been planning this warehouse since about year 3 of my marriage when I started noticing things that didn't quite add up. Little things at first. Clara's shopping habits that didn't match her art sales. Victor's too frequent business trips to countries that weren't exactly known for legitimate import-export opportunities. The way certain names would make both of them tense up at dinner parties. I'm not paranoid. I'm thorough, and my thorough assessment of the situation was that eventually, something was going to go sideways, and when it did, I needed to be ready. So I built myself a playground. Except instead of swings and slides, it had reinforced walls, hidden corridors, and enough tactical advantages to make Sun Tzu weep with joy. The exterior looked exactly like every other rundown warehouse in the district. Peeling paint, rusted doors, windows so grimy you couldn't see through them, and a general air of nothing interesting happens here, move along. Perfect camouflage. The kind of place that city inspectors would rubber stamp without a second glance, because who cares about another boring warehouse in a boring industrial park? But the interior? Oh, the interior was my masterpiece. I designed it myself, pulling from every tactical training scenario I'd ever run, every urban warfare situation I'd survived, every compound I'd ever had to infiltrate or defend. The main floor looked legitimate enough, stacked with construction equipment and materials, enough to satisfy any curious visitor or suspicious wife who decided to drop by unannounced. But that was just the opening act, the boring preview before the real show. The walls weren't just walls. They were reinforced with steel plating hidden behind standard drywall. You could fire a .50 caliber round at them, and it would stop dead, and nobody would know unless they literally started tearing the place apart. The ceiling had false panels that I could access from hidden ladders, creating an entire secondary level for observation and, if necessary, tactical positioning. The floor had pressure sensors in key locations, so I'd know exactly where anyone was standing at any given moment. Nothing obvious, nothing you'd notice unless you knew what to look for, but enough to give me a complete picture of any situation. Then there were the corridors. Oh man, the corridors. Hidden behind what looked like standard storage shelving units were passageways that ran throughout the entire building. I could move from one end of the warehouse to the other without ever being seen, popping out in different locations like the world's most tactical game of whack-a-mole. Each corridor had its own lighting system, climate control, and multiple exit points. If things went really bad, I could survive in those corridors for days with the supplies I'd stashed: water, MREs, medical supplies, ammunition, and everything else you need when you're planning for the kind of situation where your wife's mobster father sends a hit squad to kill you. The electromagnetic jammers were probably my favorite feature. Hidden in the ventilation system, completely invisible, powerful enough to fry any electronic device within the building's perimeter. Cell phones, radios, night vision goggles, fancy tactical communications equipment. All of it would become expensive paperweights the second I flipped the switch. I'd tested it thoroughly, much to the confusion of my actual construction employees who kept complaining about their phones dying whenever they worked late shifts. Must be something with the electrical system, I'd tell them, all concerned and helpful. I'll get someone to look at it. Narrator, I did not get someone to look at it. The acoustic warfare system was a little something I'd picked up from some very interesting people I knew in the Marines who specialized in psychological operations. Subsonic frequencies that you couldn't hear, but that would make you feel like you were losing your mind. Nausea, disorientation, paranoia, the whole package. Pair that with the strobe lighting system I'd installed. Hidden LEDs that could flash at frequencies specifically designed to cause maximum disorientation. And you had a recipe for turning trained professionals into confused, vomiting messes who couldn't tell up from down. And because I'm nothing if not thorough, the entire place was wired for sound and video. Cameras hidden everywhere, some obvious enough to make people think they'd found all of them, others so well concealed that a professional sweep would miss them. Multiple backup power systems, redundant recording equipment stored off-site, and enough data storage to capture every moment of whatever was about to go down. If Victor's people were coming for me, I was going to have a complete record of exactly who they sent and what they tried to do. The night Clara made that phone call, the night I heard her casually order my death, like she was calling for pizza delivery, I left Victor's penthouse and drove straight to my warehouse. I sat in my truck for about 5 minutes, just breathing, feeling the weight of 12 years of pretending shift off my shoulders. Then I pulled out my burner phone, the one Clara didn't know existed, and started making calls. First call, Derek Shaw. Sniper. Best I'd ever seen. We'd served together in Afghanistan, and I'd saved his life once during an ambush that went sideways. He'd told me if I ever needed anything at all, he'd be there. Marcus? His voice came through, confused because nobody had called this number in years. That really you, man? Yeah, it's me. Remember that favor you owe me? I'm calling it in. Silence. Then, when and where? Seattle. Tomorrow. I'll text you the address. Bring your gear. What are we doing? Hunting season, brother. I'll explain when you get here. He didn't hesitate. I'll be on the next flight. Second call, Luis Moreno. Demo expert. The man could blow up anything or, more importantly, make anything look like an accident. Luis was the kind of crazy that made other crazy people nervous. He loved explosives the way normal people love their dogs, with an enthusiasm that was both admirable and deeply concerning. Marcus Hale, he answered on the first ring. Man, I thought you were dead or married or something equally terrible. Both, actually. The married part is about to correct itself. Say no more, hermano. You need things to go boom. Maybe. Mostly I need your expertise in making sure things don't go boom when I don't want them to. Oh, so we're doing the smart kind of crazy? I can do that. When? Tomorrow. Seattle. I'll send details. Does this involve tacos? Because I'm not flying across the country without the promise of good tacos. Luis, I will buy you all the tacos in Washington State if you help me with this. Sold. See you tomorrow, SA. Third call, Trent Walker. Communications specialist. The guy could hack into anything electronic and make it do whatever he wanted. If Luis's relationship with explosives was concerning, Trent's relationship with technology was borderline sexual. He could make computers sing opera if he felt like it. This is unexpected, he said when he answered, because Trent always talked like he was commenting on a mildly interesting documentary. You realize this phone hasn't received a call in 4 years, 2 months, and 17 days. I need you in Seattle tomorrow. Bring your toys. Define toys. Whatever you need to own every electronic system in a 50-mile radius. Pause. Are we talking legal ownership or the fun kind? Trent, when have I ever called you for anything legal? Fair point. I'll catch a red eye. This better be interesting, Marcus. I left a very promising relationship with a fiber optic network to take your call. It'll be interesting. Trust me. After I hung up with Trent, I sat in my truck looking at my warehouse. My beautiful, perfectly designed, tactically superior warehouse. 3 years of preparation was about to pay off. Clara thought she was sending professionals to eliminate a weakling. Victor probably thought this would be quick and clean, just another loose end tied up, another problem solved with money and violence. They had no idea they were sending lambs to slaughter. They had no idea that their boring, harmless Marcus had built them a killing floor disguised as a construction storage facility. They had no idea that while they were planning my death, I'd been planning their entire organization's destruction. I got out of the truck and walked into my warehouse. The motion sensors registered my presence. The cameras tracked my movement. The systems hummed to life, ready and waiting. I stood in the center of that main floor, surrounded by all my carefully hidden preparations, and I smiled. Welcome to Disneyland, I said to the empty space. Except the only ride is the one that ends with you in a body bag. Tomorrow night, Victor's professionals were going to learn a very important lesson. Never underestimate the quiet guy in khakis. Especially when the quiet guy in khakis used to be a Marine Raider who spent years learning exactly how to kill people. In creative ways. This was going to be fun. Well, fun for me. Probably less fun for them. But honestly, after being called a weakling by my own wife, I wasn't feeling particularly sympathetic. The thing about ambushes is that they're really only fun when you're the one doing the ambushing. Victor's guys were about to learn this lesson the hard way, and I had front row seats to what was essentially going to be the world's most violent comedy show. It was 9:15 p.m. when they rolled up, right on schedule, because apparently even hired killers respect punctuality. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows, because nothing says, we're definitely not here to commit a crime, like rolling up in vehicles that scream, federal agents or drug dealers. You pick. I was watching them on my monitors from my little hidden command center, which was basically a closet I'd converted into mission control, complete with enough screens to make NASA jealous. Derek was positioned in the rafters with his rifle. Luis was monitoring the structural integrity sensors and looking way too excited about the possibility of blowing something up. And Trent was in the corner having what I can only describe as an intimate moment with his laptop, preparing to shut down every piece of technology these guys brought with them. 12 tangos. Derek's voice came through my earpiece, calm as someone ordering coffee. 6 per vehicle, all armed, tactical gear, night vision. They brought the good stuff. Victor must really think I'm a threat, I muttered. watching them deploy with actually impressive precision. Either that or he's overcompensating. My money's on overcompensating, Luis chimed in. Nobody sends 12 guys to kill one construction contractor unless they're either really paranoid or really bad at math. The team split up perfectly, textbook entry formation. 6 guys on the main entrance, 3 covering the sides, 3 on the back. They moved with the kind of coordination that told me these weren't amateurs. These were professionals, probably ex-military themselves, guys who'd done this before and expected to do it again. Their hand signals were crisp, their spacing was correct, their weapon discipline was solid. Under different circumstances, I might have been impressed. Under these circumstances, I was just entertained. They breached the main door with a battering ram, which was adorable because I'd left it unlocked. The door swung open with a sad little creak, and I could see the confusion on their faces through my cameras. First sign that something wasn't right. The door they'd just prepared to bust down had been open the whole time. But they pushed forward anyway, because that's what professionals do. They commit to the plan even when the plan starts smelling funny. I let them get about 15 feet inside. Let them start feeling confident. Let them think maybe this was going to be easier than expected. Then I hit the lights. Not off. That would be too simple. I killed the main lights and activated my strobe system, turning the warehouse into the world's worst nightclub. Lights flashing at specifically calculated frequencies designed to mess with depth perception, spatial awareness, and basic human dignity. What the hell? One of them shouted, which was exactly the kind of professional communication you want to hear from your elite tactical team. Then Trent worked his magic. Every piece of electronic equipment they had just died. Night vision goggles, dead. Radio communications, dead. The fancy tactical lights on their rifles, dead. Even their cell phones in their pockets were getting fried by the electromagnetic pulse. In the span of about 3 seconds, they went from being a coordinated team with technological superiority to being 12 guys stumbling around in a strobing warehouse wondering what happened to the 21st century. Now, Derek asked, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Light them up, I confirmed. The beautiful thing about Derek is that he's not just a sniper, he's an artist. He didn't go for kill shots because where's the fun in that? He started with helmets, putting rounds right through the tactical gear these guys thought would protect them. Ping. One guy's helmet went flying. Ping. Another guy's helmet cracked. It wasn't until the third helmet got ventilated that they realized they were taking fire, and by then they were already panicking. They tried to return fire, but they couldn't see anything through the strobes, their night vision was dead, and they had no idea where the shots were coming from. Bullets sprayed wildly into the darkness, hitting walls, ceilings, and absolutely nothing that mattered. It was like watching a group of toddlers play laser tag, except with real guns and significantly more crying. Status, one of them shouted into his dead radio. Status, damn it. Your status is screwed, I said over the PA system I'd installed, because if you're going to terrorize people, you might as well have some fun with it. Welcome to my warehouse, gentlemen. Hope you brought snacks because it's going to be a long night. That's when Luis activated the acoustic system. You couldn't hear it, not really, but you could feel it. Subsonic frequencies that bypassed your ears and went straight to your gut, making you feel like you were about to vomit out your own intestines. Combined with the strobe lights and the general confusion, it was basically instant motion sickness on steroids. I watched 3 guys simultaneously drop to their knees and start heaving. One guy actually did throw up inside his own helmet, which honestly made me feel a little bad for him. A little. They tried to regroup, tried to fall back to the entrance, but here's the thing about my warehouse. I controlled all the doors. The entrance they'd come through? Locked. The emergency exits they were scrambling toward? Also locked. The windows that looked like they could be broken? Reinforced with material that would take a grenade to penetrate, and even then you'd probably just make it angry. Multiple casualties, someone shouted, which was optimistic because nobody was actually dead yet. Traumatized? Absolutely. Questioning their career choices? Definitely. But casualties? Not quite. Derek was having the time of his life in the rafters, picking off weapons from their hands like he was playing the world's deadliest arcade game. A rifle would fly from someone's grip, and they'd look at their empty hands with this expression of betrayed confusion that was honestly priceless. One guy actually looked up at the ceiling, trying to spot where the shots were coming from, which was a mistake because Derek immediately shot the magazine out of the gun he was still holding. The mag hit the floor with a clatter, and the guy just stood there, probably reconsidering his entire life. "This is too easy," Derek commented. "You said these guys were professionals." "They are professionals," I replied. "I'm just more professional." Fair point. Luis was practically vibrating with excitement, monitoring all his sensors and waiting for his moment. "Can I blow something up? Please? Just one small explosion? I'll make it tasteful." "No explosions, Luis. We talked about this. You're no fun. I'm lots of fun. I just don't want to explain to the fire department why my warehouse exploded." By this point, the tactical team had completely fallen apart. They were stumbling around like drunk college students, some of them still trying to fight, others just trying to find a way out, most of them trying not to throw up again. Their coordination was gone, their confidence was shattered, and their professional demeanor had been replaced with what I can only describe as pure panic. I decided it was time to make my entrance. I stepped out from my hidden corridor, just walking casually across the warehouse floor like I was taking a stroll through the park. I had my gun, but honestly, I barely needed it. These guys were so disoriented that I could have been carrying a pool noodle and still been the most dangerous person in the room. One guy spotted me, raised his sidearm with shaking hands, and managed to squeeze off a shot that went about 6 feet wide. I didn't even flinch. I just walked up to him, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "Boo." The expression on his face was worth every penny I'd spent on this warehouse. Pure, undiluted terror. He dropped his gun and actually backed away from me like I was the monster in a horror movie. Which, to be fair, from his perspective I probably was. That's when Derek decided to show off. He put a round right through the guy's tactical vest, center mass, but it was a rubber bullet. The impact dropped him like a sack of potatoes, writhing on the ground but very much alive. "Warning shot," Derek said cheerfully through my earpiece. "That wasn't a warning shot, that was assault with a friendly reminder," I replied. "Tomato, tomato." I walked past the guy gasping on the floor and approached the rest of the team, who were now huddled together like scared sheep. Their night vision was dead, their comms were fried, their confidence was shattered, and they were currently experiencing the worst case of vertigo and nausea that technology could provide. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and confusion, probably wondering how their simple assassination job had turned into this nightmare. "So," I said, addressing the group like I was starting a TED Talk, "I'm guessing Victor didn't mention I used to be a Marine?" The looks on their faces told me that no, Victor had definitely not mentioned that. Their intelligence briefing had probably been something like construction contractor, soft target, easy money. Nobody had bothered to mention that the soft target had built a death trap and invited his old military buddies over for a reunion party. "Yeah, thought so," I continued. "Here's what's going to happen next. 2 of you are going to have a very interesting conversation with me in the back office. The rest of you are going to take a nap, courtesy of the sedatives Luis is about to introduce to your system. Don't worry, they're perfectly safe. Probably. Luis isn't actually a licensed medical professional, but he's enthusiastic, and that's what counts." Luis emerged from the shadows with a pneumatic injector and the biggest smile I'd ever seen. "Who wants to go sleepy bye?" he asked in a voice that suggested he was way too happy about this part of the job. The team didn't resist. At this point, sedation probably sounded better than staying conscious in my warehouse of horrors. One by one, they dropped like dominoes, and Luis caught each one with surprising gentleness. "Sweet dreams, fellas," he whispered to each one. "Don't let the bedbugs bite. Or the psychological trauma. That's probably going to stick around for a while." I selected the 2 who looked most senior, zip-tied their hands, and dragged them to my office. It was time for a conversation. My office wasn't really an office so much as an interrogation room that I decorated with IKEA furniture to make it look less threatening. There was a desk, some chairs, a motivational poster about teamwork that I'd hung up ironically, and absolutely no windows because windows are structural weaknesses. I zip-tied my 2 guests to the chairs, made sure they were comfortable. Well, as comfortable as you can be when you're tied up and your entire tactical operation just got dismantled by a guy your boss said was a weakling. And then I sat down across from them with a bottle of water and my friendliest smile. "So," I said, taking a sip of water while they stared at me like I was an alien. "Rough night, huh?" The older one, probably mid-40s with the kind of weathered face that said he'd seen some stuff, just glared at me. The younger one, maybe late 20s, still looked like he might throw up again. Neither of them spoke, which was expected. Professional operators don't just spill their guts the moment you ask nicely. That would be bad for business and worse for their life expectancy. Let me guess. I continued, leaning back in my chair. You're going to give me the whole name, rank, serial number routine? Maybe throw in some tough guy silence. Make me work for it. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through photos. That's cool. I respect the commitment to professionalism. But here's the thing, gentlemen. I'm not a cop. I'm not bound by laws about enhanced interrogation or Miranda rights or any of that civilized stuff. I'm just a guy who really wants some information, and I have all night to get it. Still nothing. The older guy's jaw was clenched so tight, I thought his teeth might crack. The younger one was trying to maintain eye contact, but failing miserably. I could see the calculation happening in their heads. How much pain could they endure? How long could they hold out? What were their options? Okay, cool. We're doing this the hard way, I said. But instead of pulling out torture implements or making threats, I just turned my phone around and showed them a photo. Recognize this guy? The older one's eyes widened slightly. Just a flicker, but I caught it. The photo was of him, yesterday, having lunch with his wife and 2 kids at what looked like a suburban Applebee's. Normal family moment. Completely innocuous, except for the fact that it proved I knew exactly who he was and where his family lived. That's a nice family, I said conversationally. Derek Mitchell, formerly Staff Sergeant Mitchell, Army Rangers, 3 tours, honorable discharge 5 years ago. Your daughter just made honor roll. Your son plays Little League. Your wife works at a dental office. You live in Tacoma in a house you're probably still paying the mortgage on. And you do jobs like this because the pension isn't quite cutting it and private security doesn't pay nearly as well as working for guys like Victor Rowe. Derek's face had gone pale. You leave them out of this, he said, finally breaking his silence. This is between us. Oh, absolutely, I agreed immediately. I'm not a monster, Derek. I don't hurt families. But I'm showing you this so you understand something very important. I did my homework. I know everything about you. I know about your buddy here too. I turned the phone to the younger guy. James Patterson, former Marine. Hey, we're brothers. Force Recon, 2 tours, medical discharge after taking shrapnel in Helmand. You've been doing private contracting for 3 years, sending money back to your mom in Montana who's fighting cancer. Lung cancer, stage 3, not looking great. James flinched like I'd slapped him. How the hell? How do I know all this? I interrupted. Because unlike Victor Rowe, who apparently sent you to kill me with 0 actual intelligence about who I am, I don't do anything half-assed. I've been watching Victor's operation for 3 years. I know every contractor he uses, every asset he has, every dirty cop on his payroll. I've been building files on all of you, just waiting for the day when I'd need them. I pulled out a folder, because I'm old school like that, and dropped it on the desk between us. It landed with a satisfying thump. Bank accounts, I said, tapping the folder. Yours and yours. All linked to shell companies that trace back to Victor's organization. Deposits that correspond exactly with dates of known criminal activities. Arms deals, smuggling operations, a couple of murders that are still technically unsolved. This folder right here could put both of you away for 20 to life. Easy. Federal prison, because interstate commerce and all that fun stuff that makes it a federal case. Derek was sweating now. James looked like he might actually pass out. I let them stew in that for a moment, watching the calculations shift behind their eyes. They weren't scared of me anymore. They were scared of spending the rest of their lives in prison, of their families suffering, of everything they'd built crumbling down. But here's the thing. I continued, softening my voice. I don't actually want to destroy your lives. You're not the bad guys here. You're just soldiers following orders, trying to make a living in a world that didn't give you a whole lot of options after you came home. I get it. I respect it, even. You served your country, and your country thanked you by giving you PTSD and a disability check that barely covers rent. So you take jobs from guys like Victor because what else are you going to do? Then what do you want? Derek asked, and I could hear the resignation in his voice. He knew which way this was going. I want you to tell me everything, I said simply. Who sent you? What they told you? What the broader plan is? I want details, names, locations, everything you know about Victor Rowe's operation. And in exchange, I'm going to give you something Victor never would, a choice. James spoke up for the first time, his voice shaky. What kind of choice? I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the desk like we were having a business meeting instead of an interrogation. Choice 1. You tell me everything, and then you disappear. I've got connections, resources, ways to make people vanish into new lives. New identities, clean background checks, enough money to start over somewhere far away from Victor's reach. Your family's included. Derek, I can get your kids into new schools where nobody's looking for them. James, I can get your mom into a treatment facility that actually knows what they're doing, completely paid for. You walk away from this life, and you never look back. And choice 2. Derek asked, though he already knew. Choice 2. You stay loyal to Victor, keep your mouth shut, and I turn this folder over to the FBI along with testimony about everything that happened here tonight. You spend the next 20 years in federal prison watching your family struggle without you. And Victor doesn't lift a finger to help because he's too busy protecting himself. Oh, and also, I probably kill you right now just to save time, because I'm not really in the mood to leave loose ends. The room went very quiet. I could hear the ventilation system humming, the distant sounds of Luis talking to the unconscious contractors like they were his sleeping children, and the rapid breathing of two men realizing that their lives had just hit a fork in the road. This is a trick, James said finally. You're not going to let us walk out of here. I shook my head. It's not a trick. Look, I'm going to be honest with you guys. Victor Rowe told you I was a weakling, right? Some soft construction contractor who wouldn't put up a fight? He sent you here thinking this would be easy money, a simple job. But he lied to you. He didn't tell you I was a Marine. Didn't tell you I've been planning for this exact scenario for 3 years. Didn't tell you that killing me was going to be significantly harder than killing some random civilian. That's why he sent 12 of us, Derek said quietly. He knew. Bingo, I confirmed. Victor knew exactly who I was. He's known the whole time. And he sent you anyway, knowing most of you probably wouldn't make it out. You weren't hired to kill me. You were hired to be casualties, to be the expendable assets that would soften me up for whatever comes next. He doesn't care about you. He never did. You're just bullets he fired in my direction, hoping one would land. The look of betrayal on their faces was genuine. They'd thought they were professionals doing professional work for a professional client. Now they realized they were pawns in a game they didn't understand, sent to die by a man who saw them as disposable. So yeah, I continued. I'm offering you a way out. Not because I'm a good guy. I'm really not. But because you're not my enemy. Victor is. His organization is. The people who used you and hundreds of others to build their empire? They're my enemy. You? You're just victims of the same system that screwed me over when I got out. Derek and James looked at each other, having some kind of silent conversation that only people who've been in combat together can have. Finally, Derek turned back to me. If we talk, if we tell you everything, you swear you'll get us out? Our family's safe, new lives, the whole deal. I swear it. I said, and I meant it. I've already got the infrastructure in place. I've been preparing for this for years. I can have you and your families relocated within 48 hours, complete with new identities, bank accounts, the works. You'll vanish so completely that Victor could spend the rest of his life looking and never find you. Another long silence. Then James spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. Victor told us you were embezzling from him. Said you'd married his daughter to get inside his business, that you'd been stealing for years, and that you were planning to run. He said you had information that could destroy him, and we needed to eliminate you before you could use it. He made you sound like the bad guy. Classic projection, I said. Accuse your enemy of exactly what you're doing. It's manipulation 101. What else? And then they started talking. For the next 2 hours, Derek and James spilled everything. Names of other contractors, details about smuggling routes, information about Victor's network of corrupted officials, upcoming operations, financial structures, everything. I recorded it all, my phone sitting on the desk between us capturing every word, every detail, every piece of evidence that would eventually bring down Victor's entire empire. They told me about the colonel, some ex-military guy Victor had on retainer for the really nasty jobs. They told me about Clara's involvement, how she'd been part of the operation since before we even met, how the coffee spill meet-cute had been completely staged. They told me about shipments of weapons, drugs, even human trafficking that Victor had his fingers in. The more they talked, the angrier I got, but I kept my face neutral, kept my voice calm, kept them talking. When they finally ran out of information, Derek looked at me with something like hope in his eyes. That's everything we know. Every detail. Are we good? I nodded and pulled out my phone, making a call. Trent? Yeah. Activate the package. 2 people, plus families. Derek Mitchell and James Patterson. Pull the files and initiate the relocation protocol. I want them gone by tomorrow night. I hung up and looked at both of them. You're officially dead men. At least, that's what Victor's going to think. Your old lives end tonight. Tomorrow, you start new ones. Just like that. James asked, stunned. Just like that? I confirmed. Welcome to the Witness Protection Program, except better funded and significantly less bureaucratic. Trent will handle everything. While Clara was at home probably practicing her concerned wife face in the mirror for when she'd have to identify my body, I was in my warehouse office pulling up files that would make Victor Rowe wish he'd never heard the name Marcus Hale. See, here's what nobody understood about me. I don't do anything halfway. When I commit to something, whether it's building a house or destroying a criminal empire, I'm all in. And I'd been all in on dismantling Victor's organization for about 3 years now. Ever since I started noticing that the father-in-law who claimed to run a legitimate import-export business had more connections to Eastern European arms dealers than to actual shipping companies. The beauty of being underestimated is that people don't watch you carefully. Victor thought I was just some boring construction guy married to his daughter, so he never noticed when I started asking questions at family dinners that seemed innocent but were actually intelligence gathering. He never noticed when I befriended his associates at parties, getting phone numbers and business cards under the guise of networking. He definitely never noticed when I started placing my own people inside his organization, because why would he? I was just Marcus, the harmless son-in-law who couldn't possibly be a threat. Let me introduce you to my greatest hits, the assets I'd been cultivating while Clara thought I was out playing golf or attending boring construction conferences. First up, Gerald Brooks, ex-CIA, currently running corporate security for one of Victor's shell companies. I'd met Gerald at a security conference 2 years ago. Yes, I actually did attend some boring conferences, but only the useful ones, and we'd hit it off over drinks. Turned out Gerald had gotten pushed out of the CIA for being too ethical, which in that world is basically like being fired for not being corrupt enough. He was bitter, broke, and looking for a way to stick it to the people who'd screwed him over. I've got a job for you, I told him after our 3rd whiskey. But it's going to require you to play a role for a while, maybe a long while. Gerald had looked at me with those tired, cynical eyes that all ex-agency people have and said, how long and how deep? Couple years. Deep enough to get inside a criminal organization's security infrastructure. Shallow enough that you won't actually have to do anything that'll keep you up at night. What's the pay? Nothing up front. Everything on the back and when we take them down. Plus the satisfaction of putting bad guys away, if you're into that sort of thing. He'd smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him all night. I'm very into that sort of thing. When do I start? So Gerald had gotten himself hired by Victor, working his way up from basic security consultant to head of corporate security for Victor's entire West Coast operation. For 2 years, he'd been documenting everything. Shipment schedules, security protocols, the identities of corrupted officials, financial transactions that didn't quite add up. He'd been my inside man, my eyes and ears, and Victor had no idea that his head of security was actively building the case that would destroy him. Then there was Eric Dunn, ex-DEA, currently working as an insurance claims adjuster for the company that handled Victor's shipping insurance. Eric had a similar story to Gerald. Good agent, too honest, forced out when he wouldn't play ball with some corrupt supervisors. I'd found him working a boring desk job and hating every minute of it, and I'd offered him a chance to do what he loved again, investigating criminals, just without the badge and bureaucracy. Insurance fraud investigation, I'd pitched to him over coffee. You'd be looking into a shipping company that I suspect is using insurance claims to launder money and cover up illegal shipments. It's all legal, all above board. You'd just be doing your actual job, but the information you gather would be going to more than just your employer. Eric had been skeptical at first. Why not just go to the authorities? Because the authorities are on his payroll, I'd replied. At least some of them. We need to build an airtight case before we bring in the feds. Otherwise, it'll get swept under the rug by some dirty cop or corrupted prosecutor. I need someone who knows how to follow the money, who can document everything properly, who can build a case that's so solid even the most crooked lawyer can't make it disappear. He'd thought about it for maybe 10 seconds before extending his hand. When do I start? For 18 months, Eric had been systematically documenting every fraudulent insurance claim Victor had filed, every suspicious shipment that got damaged or lost, every financial irregularity that pointed to money laundering. He'd built a paper trail that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy, all while Victor thought he was just some boring insurance guy doing boring insurance work. And then there was Stuart Briggs, ex-military intelligence, currently running a private security firm that Victor used for various special projects. Stuart was my favorite because he was the boldest plant. I'd literally introduced Victor to Stuart at a business event, singing his praises about how great Stuart's security company was, how they could help with Victor's unique security needs. Victor had hired Stuart's firm within a month, and Stuart had spent the last 2 years getting access to information that most people in Victor's organization didn't even know existed. "You want me to get hired by a mobster to spy on him for you?" Stuart had asked when I'd first approached him with the idea. That's either the smartest plan I've ever heard or the dumbest, and I'm genuinely not sure which. Little bit of both, I'd admitted. But think about it. You get to run your own security firm, make legitimate money, and also help take down a criminal organization. It's like being a spy again, except you get better benefits and nobody's trying to kill you. People are definitely going to try to kill me if this goes sideways. Okay, yes, there's that risk. But I'll have your back the whole time. And when this is done, you'll have a reputation as the security guy who helped bring down a major criminal enterprise. That's good for business. He'd grinned. You know what? I'm in. This is either going to be the best decision I ever made or my last decision. Either way, it'll be interesting. These three formed the core of my intelligence network, but they weren't alone. Over 3 years, I'd systematically identified weak points in Victor's organization and filled them with my people. The accountant who handled Victor's legitimate businesses, one of my guys, documenting every transaction. The logistics coordinator at Victor's main warehouse, my plant, tracking every shipment. The IT consultant who maintained Victor's computer systems, that was Trent, actually, who'd gotten himself hired 6 months ago and had been quietly copying every file, every email, every piece of digital evidence that Victor thought was secure. I'd built a web so extensive that Victor was essentially running his entire operation under my surveillance. Every move he made, every deal he struck, every crime he committed was being documented by someone on my payroll. And the beautiful part was that he had no idea. To him, these were just employees and contractors, people doing their jobs, nothing suspicious. He'd gotten so arrogant, so confident in his own security, that it never occurred to him that someone might be running a counterintelligence operation against him from inside his own organization. But the crown jewel of my infiltration? That came in the form of a phone call I'd received 6 months ago from a number I didn't recognize. I'd answered cautiously. "You don't survive as long as I have by taking unknown calls without being careful," and a gravelly voice had said, "Marcus Hale? This is George Owens. You might not remember me, but you saved my life in Kandahar in 2009. I'd remembered immediately. Lieutenant George Owens, pinned down by enemy fire, bleeding out from a leg wound. I'd pulled him out of that kill zone, tourniqueted his leg, and carried him half a mile to the extraction point. He'd promised if I ever needed anything at all, he'd be there. I'd told him I'd never collect because that's not why you save people, but apparently George had been keeping tabs on me anyway. I remember, I'd said carefully. What's this about? It's about Victor Rowe, George had replied. He just hired me, calls himself Victor, goes by the Colonel in certain circles, wants me to handle some wet work, starting with a guy named Marcus Hale. Funny thing is, when I looked into you, I realized you were the Marcus Hale who saved my life. Small world. I'd felt my heart rate pick up. When? Soon. He hasn't given me a specific timeline yet, but he's paying premium rates, which means he wants it done right. Thought you should know. What are you going to tell him? I'm going to tell him I need time to scout the target, maybe a few weeks to set up the perfect scenario. That should buy you time to do whatever you're planning. And Marcus? When this goes down, when you make your move against him, I want in. That bastard just tried to pay me to kill the man who saved my life. That kind of disrespect doesn't sit well with me. And just like that, I gained another asset. George had been feeding me information about Victor's plans, his backup operations, his contingency protocols. Every meeting George had with Victor, I got a full debrief. Every instruction Victor gave, I knew about it before George even left the room. Victor thought he'd hired an ace in the hole. Instead, he'd hired my early warning system. The night of the warehouse ambush, after Derek and James had spilled everything they knew, I'd sat in my office and pulled up the master file. 3 years of intelligence gathering, hundreds of documents, thousands of photographs, recorded conversations, financial records, shipping manifests, witness testimonies. I'd built a case against Victor Rowe that was so comprehensive, so thoroughly documented, that even the most corrupt prosecutor couldn't make it disappear. Gerald had documented the security protocols and the identities of every criminal associate in the organization. Eric had tracked the money, showing exactly how Victor laundered his profits through fraudulent insurance claims and shell companies. Stewart had mapped the entire operational structure, identifying key players and their roles. Trent had pulled every digital file, every incriminating email, every piece of electronic evidence. And George had provided insider information about Victor's most sensitive operations, the ones he didn't trust to anyone else. I had everything: names, dates, locations, transaction records, photographs, audio recordings. I had evidence of arms smuggling, drug trafficking, human trafficking, money laundering, bribery, corruption, and about a dozen murders. I had it all organized, cross-referenced, and ready to hand over to the authorities. The only question was which authorities to trust, because Victor had his hooks in a lot of people. That's when I'd reached out to my ace in the hole, Assistant Director Jennifer Walsh, FBI, who I'd worked with on a joint operation back when I was still in the Marines. We'd kept in touch over the years, and I knew she was clean, one of the few people in federal law enforcement who couldn't be bought or intimidated. I'd sent her an encrypted message, have evidence on major criminal organization, West Coast operations. Interested? Her reply had come back within an hour. Very. When can we meet? Soon. Preparing final pieces. We'll contact when ready. Everything was in place. The web was complete. Victor's entire empire was compromised, surrounded by my people, monitored by my assets, documented for prosecution. He just didn't know it yet. He thought he was the spider, sitting in the center of his web, controlling everything. He had no idea that I'd built a bigger web around his, that every strand he controlled was connected to strands I controlled, that his web was really just a small section of mine. Federal agencies love gift baskets, and mine came wrapped in 3 years of damning evidence, tied with a bow made of Victor's own arrogance. I met Jennifer Walsh in a secure location, a diner so aggressively normal that nobody would suspect it of hosting a meeting that would dismantle a criminal empire. She ordered coffee, I ordered pie, and I slid an encrypted drive across the table like we were in a spy movie, because sometimes life imitates art. Everything's on here, I told her. Arms trafficking, money laundering, human trafficking, corrupted officials. Names, dates, financial records, recorded conversations. It's airtight. Jennifer plugged the drive into her laptop, and I watched her eyes widen as she scrolled through the files. Holy hell, Marcus. This is years of work. 3 years, to be exact. I've been patient. You've built our case for us, she said, looking up with something like awe. We could move on this immediately. That's the idea. Victor's getting nervous. He sent 12 guys to kill me last night. Did they succeed? I smiled. What do you think? Within 48 hours, simultaneous raids hit every property Victor owned. Clara came home 3 days after the warehouse incident, suitcase in hand, playing her final card. She found me sitting calmly in our bedroom armchair, completely unsurprised by her dramatic entrance. It's over, Marcus, she announced, trying to sound powerful. Whatever you think you are, whatever game you're playing, it ends now. I didn't move. Actually, Clara, it's just beginning. Her hand went for her purse, rookie mistake. I had her zip-tied and secured in 11 seconds flat, which I'll admit was slower than my usual 9, but I was out of practice. She struggled for exactly 3 seconds before realizing it was pointless, then glared at me with something that looked almost like professional respect. You're no weakling, she admitted, probably the most honest thing she'd said in 12 years. Wow, only took you 12 years to figure that out. Stellar detective work, honey. That's when the front door exploded inward with the kind of aggressive authority that only federal agents possess. My assistant, Rebecca, 5 years of bringing me coffee and filing paperwork. walked in flashing an FBI badge. Clara's jaw actually dropped. You've got to be kidding me. Nope, I said cheerfully. Surprise. Victor and Clara both got life sentences. Their empire collapsed like a Jenga tower built by drunk toddlers. At sentencing, Clara leaned over and whispered, "Others will come for you. My handlers won't let this go." I whispered back, "Tell them to bring snacks. I'll be waiting." 6 months later, I disappeared. Marcus Hale ceased to exist. His construction company sold. His bank accounts closed. His entire life packed into boxes and shipped to nowhere. I became Roland Kane, friendly builder in a quiet Colorado mountain town. My neighbors think I'm just a nice guy who likes hiking and makes excellent chili for community potlucks. My modest cabin has more security than Fort Knox and enough tactical advantages to repel a small army. The basement contains supplies for a year-long siege. The woods around my property are mapped and monitored. Old habits die hard. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I wonder if Clara's mysterious handlers will send someone. If they do, they'll learn what she never understood. You don't call a Marine weak and expect to survive the lesson. I'm just Roland now. Boring, harmless Roland. And I'm ready.